Hello everyone, welcome to the new edition of Leadership Lecture Series. And this Leadership Lecture Series is going to be different. We have founders, we have managing director, we have professor, but the person that we have today is a bit different and unique. And I think the first thing that is true for IIT is anything and everything that you can say about India is also applicable for IIT. So it's as the going say, IITian can do anything. And for the same day, we have Mr. Kannan Iyer, who is a renowned filmmaker. To talk more about him, I want to call Mr. Kaviraj Nair, that is CEO of Office of Institutional Development.
Good evening, everyone, and a very warm welcome to today's leadership lecture series. As the previous speaker said, we have had the opportunities of listening to people from the corporate world, from the academia, and all of that. But it's not always that we get to listen to one of our alumni who has excelled in the field of media and movies, right? And so it's an absolute honor and privilege to welcome Mr. Kannan Iyer to this evening session. And just a brief profile of Mr. Kannan Iyer I will read out. Hearty welcome to one and all on behalf of the Office of Alumni and Corporate Relations. This summer evening is a special one for all of us at IIT Madras, of course. Today stands a testament to the very simple fact that pick a walk of life and you will find an IIT Madras alumnus making waves there. Be it technology, government service, music, or as is the case this evening, the very versatile field of cinema. It gives me immense pleasure to welcome again Mr. Kannan Iyer, the director of A Watan Mere Watan, the movie that's getting very good reviews in all media. Mr. Kannan Iyer is a 1981 batch alumnus from the Department of Mechanical Engineering, IIT Madras. His previous film as a director is a much acclaimed supernatural thriller, Ek Thi Dayan. He was also one of the writers of the action comedy Daud, starring Sanjay Dutt. He did his MFA in film at Temple University in Philadelphia before stepping into Bollywood as Mr. Shekhar Kapoor's assistant in the world-renowned film Bandit Queen. He has also co-written a novel with Ms. Madhulika Lidle called The Pledge in the genre of fantasy fiction. Volume 1 was published last year by Speaking Tiger. Sir, welcome back to your alma mater, and we look forward to a very riveting discussion this evening. Thank you.
So, hello everybody. I must thank the Dean, Professor Mahesh Panchanula, and Mr. Kaviraj, CEO, for inviting me to my beloved alma mater for this leadership lecture series. It's a special honor which I will forever cherish. I have titled my talk as A Modest Walk on the Path of Love and Doubt. It's an absolutely strange, dissonant title for a talk in a leadership lecture series. Because almost all the talks you have heard in this series have been inspiring stories of IIT alumni about technology, science, business, finance, marketing, organization building, risk taking. All these are hugely important topics for the creme de la creme students of IIT Madras. So I was talking to some of my distinguished batchmates who have already given leadership lectures here, whether I should even do this talk. And one of them put it very beautifully. He said, all of us have come and given a leadership lecture on finding something, on having found something. Your talk about your wide-ranging and still ongoing endeavor of searching will introduce students to an important alternate perspective, especially so in a world which is increasingly putting a premium on creative multidisciplinary skills and swiftly evolving boundaries of knowledge. So perhaps you should listen to me with the same attitude you would have while reading a literary novel. Just like a novel leaves you with some food for thought, I hope my talk will do the same for all of you. Talking about novels, at the end of the talk, there will be a surprise announcement and a small surprise events. Wait for it, you'll enjoy it. You know, I entered IIT almost 50 years ago. For this audience, it's not just historic, I think it is prehistoric. Okay. It was a world of vastly limited communication. But what was the implication of such a world for an IIT student? Nowadays, students would have read a lot, seen a lot, heard a lot about IITs before they entered the campus. But then, the IIT was this mysterious, enticing place like a Shangri-La, hidden in the high Himalayas. So we students entered IIT with a far greater innocence and naivete than students of present times do. Literally shut off from the outside world. Unlike now, where connectivity and communication keep you continuously and deeply connected to the world. Just think about it. Even parents were a distant presence, connected by snail mail. So the campus experience could play a great role in shaping you as a person. You were given an opportunity to discover yourself in a secluded, isolated island. Perhaps this did not make much of a difference to those students who were already clear about the path ahead of them. For example, IIT, America, the world of cutting edge science, technology, management in some capacity or the other. Or IIT, IIM, corporate career in India. Very few, however, chose the path of a pure engineering career or an entrepreneurial career. I'm essentially talking, of course, about the UG program, of which I was a part. So while this kind of clear path accounted for most of the students, there were a handful of students every year who were racked by doubt about their path ahead, searching for a path, a profession to love and make a lifelong commitment to. And one such student was me. So, when your choice of profession, when your life choice was so fundamentally up in the air, when you're full of doubt about the basic questions of profession, of life mission, events that happen around you in campus life tend to play a big role in influencing your path. Of course, these events would be experienced by all students. But for those who had already chosen their path, the processing of these events would not lead to all kinds of mental and emotional churning, as it did in my case and others like me. There were numerous unusual events in which I was involved, numerous. I will talk in detail about only a select few because of shortage of time, while perhaps mentioning others in passing. I will first mention three events which played an influential role on the path to a film many decades later, a film like "Ye Watan Mere Watan," and the books which I have co-authored, the Mandala Purana series, and one Mr. Kaviraj hasn't mentioned, the Doom series, which is what the surprise announcement at the end of my talk is going to be. While the film is about a fight for freedom and justice during our independence struggle, the books too deal with the same themes in very different story worlds. So how did my life here lead to such commitment and such thought? It's a question I was asked by IITM TV yesterday, and I asked them to wait for a more detailed answer during this talk. You know, my first semester here witnessed an astonishing event, an event which I am almost 100% certain nobody in this audience and probably no one in the entire campus has heard of or remembers. The first student strike in any of the IITs. And the strike took place at a particularly unusual time, a time in which anybody who struck anywhere, be it a student, be it a worker, was promptly locked into jail. The infamous emergency. And in that emergency period, most astonishingly, there was a student strike in IIT Madras. It shook all of us, and we were just not even 2-3 months old in the campus. And I remember those days where most of us were extremely scared. But here was our seniors. I mean, it was a fire engineering course at that time. The main committee there went around campaigning with fiery speeches, saying that it was all about a newly suddenly introduced attendance regulation which had put many students under a lot of pressure, because all of a sudden they found themselves disqualified from being able to give exams. None of the executive committee of students, the general secretary and all the secretaries, were personally affected by this. But they somehow decided to take a stand. They were warned that leave anything else alone, this is the emergency. But they stuck to their guns, and even more surprisingly, almost all the students, and we are talking about thousands of them, just decided to join the strike because they believed it was right. The opposition was not to the attendance rule per se, the opposition was to the way it had happened, suddenly putting the performances of many otherwise brilliant students in jeopardy. And you will be amazed by what happened. Seeing that this was a just cause, the institute agreed. And the attendance rule was brought in a way which was more just. So it left me with the lasting impression that if you had just cause and fought for it with a clear conscience, good things could happen. And so I was confronted with this kind of situation, something similar but in a very different space, in my second year. You wouldn't believe it, but there used to be a big army of hostel sweepers. And they all used to look like famine victims, utterly starved, no flesh on bone. And I would start talking to them, and I realized that their lives were horrifically miserable. And as they talked more to me and I asked them more questions, I realized that this was not the institute's fault, because the institute managed the sweepers through various contractors who were doing the most hideous injustice to these sweepers. Once again, just imagine, I mean, all of you are IT students. There was a sweeper strike, and I was kind of sweepers representative. And thousands of undergraduate students, when we went around, me and the sweepers talking to them, they all agreed that what was happening to the sweepers was completely unfair. And the institute management responded in a magnificent way. They threw out the contractors and they gave these sweepers permanent employment. Once again making me feel that the fight for justice is a good fight.
I was returning to campus many decades later in 2006 for my batch reunion. So, each of us, after the ceremonies were over, were free to wander around their favorite spots. So, I went to my hostel, Godavari, wandering around. And all of a sudden, one man comes up to me and asks me, are you Kannan sir? I said, yes. Then he says, do you remember me? I said, no, because I hadn't come to campus literally for 20 years. He said, you saved our lives, sir. You made sure, I'm a sweeper here and I'm still a sweeper here. And by the time he just asked me to wait, in 15 minutes, every sweeper in the hostel zone just came to me, like the 40, 50 of them. And I remembered all their faces. And all of them, thanking me for events that had happened decades before, because it made their lives, it made such a fundamental difference to them. And how did it happen? Because the students of IIT saw the justice in it and supported me and sweepers in this cause, just like they did the previous year. So that was the second event which pushed me towards something like a film like "Ae Watan Mere Watan." And the third event is I fell in love with cinema. How did that happen? OAT, once again, like you guys have a zillion ways of seeing movies. A fascinating world of cinema opened up in front of us. And then we were saying, like, how do we get to see these films on a regular basis? How? It's not like you guys ki torrent kholo, download karo, there are a zillion channels now कि कहीं भी जाके पिक्चर देख लो, जो भी मर्जी हो आसानी से मिल जाती है अब. That time it wasn't like that, and what we did to make this happen would tell you how much Desmond and I loved cinema. There was only one place to see movies, European and Japanese movies, the classics. I mean, anybody who's in love with cinema would know all these names. I mean, whether it is Ingmar Bergman from Sweden, or whether it is Akira Kurosawa and Yasujiro Ozu from Japan, whether it is Orson Welles from America, whether it is Satyajit Ray and Mrinal Sen from India. These films were not easy to see. There was one place in India, the National Film Archives in the Film and Television Institute in Pune. They used to keep these 16 mm reels, dabbas of film. And there used to be a network of what used to be called film societies all over India. There must have been thousands of them, of film crazy guys and women tucked away in the small corners of India. So we would go to the railway station, go and collect it from the go down there, come and screen the film here, again go back to the railway station, book it to the next film society in whichever corner of India. It used to take hours and hours of bureaucratic work to be able to see one film. Such was our love and passion for film that we did it. And it transformed our lives. Me and Desmond just went nuts. Film. And we used to show 1 or 2 films a month. And the great thing is, once again, the CLT, which all of you have seen, used to be jam-packed. The years that we ran the Film Society, there was standing room only. It was that packed. People were, it really enriched their lives. And I realized that film is something that I loved deeply. But I hadn't yet come to the stage of thinking. It was there in my mind that I wanted to be a filmmaker. It was there. But not to the point where I say, chalo, kudo wahan. It wasn't like that. Interestingly, in the case of my friend Desmond, it was like that. I mean, Desmond will figure often in this story because we did a lot of things together. I should tell you a small thing about Desmond. What does he do now? Now he makes an Indian version of tequila. Okay, he calls it agave spirit because you cannot claim to make tequila. So he was told about, like, listen, you got to wrap this up within 1 hour. His leadership lecture. But what he had done is he had brought all his various bottles, very attractive looking bottles. And I was just talking to him yesterday and he was telling me, I was told 1 hour, but the students wouldn't just let me go. This thing went on for 2 hours, asking me all kinds of questions about booze. Okay. And then he said, chalo, wrap it up. Okay, wrap it up. And he says, instead of leaving the room, the students crowded around me and around the bottles, waiting for sips. So he gave all of them a sip. And then they said, but ye to pani hai. He said, what, do you think I'm nuts that I would come and serve you booze in IIT Madras? So he had actually filled all these beautiful looking bottles of his company. His company is named after him. Actually, I shouldn't be marketing booze here, so I'm going to shut up. Let me continue with the story. So, yeah, so we talked about justice, we talked about film, and somehow these two things connect in Ye Watan Mere Watan and the books which I have co-written. But there was also another strong thread of thought and feeling operating in me. I was surrounded, like I'm sure you all are. I was dazzled by the brilliance of the students around me. They were absolutely superb. But the question arises, what is the role of IIT in the development of India? The amount of investment by the people of India in an IIT was not something to be scoffed at. You all will be surprised by the figures. IIT Madras, we're talking about between 1959 and 1961, cost something like 1% of the union budget. We're talking about, equivalences are not really bang on, but we are talking about, in today's terms, tens of thousands of crores. And what did the people of India get in return if 80% of the best of Indian tech students just left the country? It used to be a question that really bothered me. There are many, many things I worked on along with Desmond around this. I don't want to get into all that because I don't have the time for it. With students of other IITs, people who believed that somebody should do something about this massive brain drain. And I remember we had a terrific director at that time, Professor Indiresan. So he used to be very accessible to students. So this used to be trouble me enough for me to ask him this question, and he used to laugh it off. He said, Kannan, what do you want the Indian government to do? Do you want the Indian government to be like dictatorial like the Chinese government and rob students of all liberties? Don't worry, one day the best students of India will work for India. It will happen. And as it happens today, not even 10% of IIT graduates, undergraduates go abroad, right? And that's something that makes me very, very happy. But at that time, this really looked hopeless. एक तो सब बाहर चले जाते थे, and secondly, those that remain, what exactly were they doing which was directly connected to what India needed? And at that time, something very interesting happened. How many of you know Professor Ashok Jhunjhunwala? How many of you know? Yeah. So, Professor Jhunjhunwala joined IIT in 1980 or 1979, and I left IIT in 1981. So, most of you must know he was an IIT Kanpur, probably 1974 graduate. He went abroad, finished his PhD and came to teach in IIT Madras. And there was another person, a PhD from IIT Kanpur called Professor Krishnan, who could easily have taught in an IIT, but he didn't. He decided to teach in Madras University as a matter of principle. He's saying because highly trained professors should go to colleges like non-IIT colleges and spread their knowledge. So, we are talking about, and there was another person called Professor M.D. Srinivas, a brilliant theoretical physicist who had just come from CERN in Trieste. Like you all have heard of CERN in Trieste, right? It is one of the world's leading research centers in physics, atomic physics, subatomic physics. These people get together and they form this very fascinating group. And this group had connections in all the elite scientific and technological institutions of India. In short, it was called PPST, Patriotic and People Oriented Science and Technology Group, which went into this question systematically. These were professors who had studied in the best institutes of India and the world, examining this question about how can IITs become deeply relevant to what India needs. And that was another thing in which I spent a lot of time on. And I am saying this because you will realize that it ties up into one more film activity which will come later on. Well, I might as well complete that story. IIT and the technological requirements of India. Some of you might have heard of the kinds of, broadly speaking, telecom technology interventions that a group of 3 professors from IIT Madras did. One is Professor Jhunjhunwala, then Professor Bhaskar Ramurthy and Professor Timothy Gonsalves. Right? Later on, Professor Timothy Gonsalves became the founder director of IIT Mandi, and Professor Bhaskar became the director of IIT Madras before Professor Kamakoti. You know, IITs were founded based on the Sarkar Committee report, pre-independence report, which talks very, very detailedly about how IITs can contribute to India. Something that was never put into practice over the many decades of the existence of IIT. Till at scale, and I am talking about at scale, there were individuals ikka dukka here and there, but at scale, that is what IIT Madras Research Park has done. It is an absolutely pioneering effort that embodies the original pre-independence vision of what higher scientific and technological education can do for a free India. And so, I decided Professor Jhunjhunwala's own life trajectory from a school student, how he came to, with total shiddat, embody the mission of the IITs. So, it is an 18-hour interview session where we explore various aspects. So we are now working on it. Hopefully it will come out as a book and as a video series, so that people know the history, an important part of the history of science and technology in India. And that is where it finally connected up to my activities in film, because I decided to film my interactions with him as we discuss all this. So, I was now in my 4th or 5th year, and here my friend Desmond was gung ho. He was brilliant. I mean, those days it was a different grading system, but out of 10, if the class topper was something like 8.7, so Desmond had 8.3 or 8.4. And he decided that I am not going to do STEM anymore, I am going to do filmmaking. And so he went to Temple University in Philadelphia to do a Masters of Fine Arts, but the IIT brand was such that he got a fantastic fellowship in order to pursue that. And then he continued. There are a number of film related activities, couple of them we did together, which I will come to later on in my talk. But even as he was doing all the applications, mera dil nahi mana. I somehow, because I was so much involved in questions of India's development, मुझे लगा कि getting into film now is very self-indulgent. It's very selfish. मुझे ऐसा लगा. And I felt I just needed to deep dive more into the question of India's development. So, I was searching for a mentor, pure, incorruptible mentor to work with. How many of you have heard of Baba Amte? Has anybody heard? Right? Just a handful of you have heard. I'm just going to tell you one story about him, one little story, to understand what I was looking for. This story will make it very clear. So, Baba Amte was from a very rich family. He was very fiery in temperament. He was extremely courageous man. He's the kind of man, India was full of jungles at that time. Puri raat bitate the. He was born and brought up in Nagpur. Puri raat bitate Nagpur ke aaspaas ke jangalon mein. Nischint, not worried about all the dangers those dense forests posed to anybody. He used to, there's a famous incident where some British soldiers were teasing Indian women and he got into a physical fight with them. Fearless man. So he fought with his family. He was a Brahmin. And in a small place in Maharashtra called Varora, he goes and lives in a Dalit colony. He just lives amongst them, going around with them, doing their daily work of sanitation. And one day, already think of the great life choice he had made. Just think about it. One day, it's misty, it's dark, he is walking back home when he suddenly टकराते हैं किसी चीज से, तो झुकते हैं, उनको कुछ ही सी सब बंडल. तब तो रात में लाइट्स नहीं थी, रोशनी नहीं थी, क्या है ये बंडल. थोड़ा खोल के देखते हैं, and he recoils. It's a leper in an advanced stage of disease. And his wife narrates, for the first time in his life, Muralidhar Amte, who later on got called Baba Amte, felt an emotion called fear for the first time in his life. What does he decide to do? He said, मैं डर से हारूंगा नहीं हारूंगा. He went away. इसको देख के repelled by it, he went away home, and as he is going home, he is thinking about this. He said, मैं डर से हारूंगा नहीं. Goes back, brings that man home, and with his hands comforts him, cleans him, and that started his lifelong dedication to the cause of rehabilitating and curing leprosy patients in India. He was such a man, a Gandhian. In fact, one of Mahatma Gandhi's favorite youngsters, because Mahatma Gandhi used to be in Wardha Ashram those days, Sevagram, which was very close to Varora and Nagpur. For many years, I worked under his influence in central India, going around along with a group. I was not alone, along with a group of like-minded people, students from various top universities of India who believed in similar things. And what we really worked on is what's called watershed management. Water is a huge problem in the arid areas of India. Building 1,000 big dams is no solution. People-centric solutions were needed. Spent a few years on that. It's extremely tough. It's a problem that has not been solved till today, the problem of water in India. But those 3-4 years of living and wandering around the small towns and villages of central India finally brought back film into my life. Tab tak, in those 7-8 years, I don't think I saw a single film. मुझे लगा, बार बार मुझे ये बात खुरेदता था कि what is it that I really, really love? What can I do day and night, irrespective of success and failure, just for the love of it? And it was film. And then it was then that I decided, come hell or high water, kuch bhi ho, I am going to devote the rest of my life to film, and that too to film for a mass audience, because mass audience connected up with whatever development concerns I had all these years. I was not interested in making films for artistic so-called, I mean, these are all simplistic definitions, but I hope you all get it, for artistic reasons. That didn't primarily interest me. I just wanted to plunge into the world of popular cinema. So once I finished my MFA, and I so happens I would go to the same university as Desmond did, but in order to get into it, unlike Desmond, for whom the IIT chap was enough, for me I needed to do much more. I had to write several screenplays, several reviews, criticisms, knowledge of film theory. And when I sent all that, eventually I was lucky enough to get a fellowship too. So in 3 years, I did my MFA there, did a couple of projects, one a documentary, one a piece of fiction, in order to finally earn an MFA. And then I come to India with one purpose. For me, I have been very, very far away from the world of Bollywood. I just had one purpose: let me know the world which I am getting into, right? It was highly, क्या बोलूँ मैं, insular world, highly insular world. Now it is not so. I am talking about early 90s, more than 20 years ago, a very insular world. But luckily, my American degree came handy, and I was able to, Shekhar Kapoor himself, he said, come over. I called him from America. He said, come over, I am doing 4 films now. Very quickly, I'll run you past some little aspects of my film industry related experience for you to get an idea ki how films get made and how films get unmade also. Yeah. Shekhar Kapoor was directing 4 films when I joined him as an assistant. Right. He, many of you might know, you all have heard of Dev Anand, right? So he was Dev Anand's sister's son, right? He was a film insider. 4 films he was making, one with Sunny Deol and Jackie Shroff. I'm giving you these names just to show the kind of films he was making, right? And one with Amir Khan, one to introduce Bobby Deol's debut film, and the 4th film which was under discussion and planning was Bandit Queen. As it happens, because of various things, जो पिक्चर सनी देओल और जैकी श्रॉफ के साथ बन रही थी उसका नाम था दुश्मनी, वो करीब 1 घंटे उसका एडिट हुआ था, फिर भी वो पिक्चर बंद हो गई. आमिर खान के साथ पिक्चर थी टाइम मशीन, विच वॉज काइंड ऑफ सिमिलर टू बैक टू द फ्यूचर. वो भी करीब 1 घंटा रेडी था, वो भी बंद हो गई. About 30 days shooting of Bobby Deol's debut film, वो भी बंद हो गई. These things used to happen in the film industry.
After I think 1996, Dushmani, that's a violent love story.
हाँ, तो somebody else took it up again. Many years later, वो बंद पड़ी थी, तो somebody just did it. But Shekhar Kapoor by that time had left the film for 5-6 years. Nothing happened to it. वैसे ही बंद पड़ी थी. It was very common in the Bollywood of those days. It was very common in the Bollywood of those days. But Bandit Queen, that went ahead fully. And my role in Bandit Queen, there is a role in filmmaking called director's assistant, not assistant director. That's different. An assistant director is not, that role is very close to film production. In other words, there isn't much creative about it. But a DA, a director's assistant, for somebody entering the film industry is a job to die for. Because you are the director's shadow. You are present in every meeting, taking notes with every department. So you begin to understand the directorial process very intimately. And I was very lucky. I was very close to Shekhar, and literally I can almost say that I used to stay at his house, whether it is in Bombay or in Delhi. A lot of Bandit Queen was around Delhi. The amount he directed Bandit Queen brilliantly. All the more, see, he was an unlikely choice for Bandit Queen. Bandit Queen is a very gritty film. The films that he had made before, whether it is Masoom or whether it's Mr. India, don't automatically suggest that he is the correct director for a film like Bandit Queen. But that combination, it's a counter-intuitive combination. Shekhar Kapoor's lyricism and the dark grittiness of Bandit Queen, when they merged together, they made a classic. I learnt so much in those 2 years of being his perpetual shadow, that after that I just thought there is no point in assisting anybody anymore in direction. It was such a fulfilling experience. And I see many faces here of people who are kind of tempted to join the film industry. You are lucky if a certain kind of director of a certain class, if you are able to become a DA, nothing like it.
I am asking another question. That time, the famous director Subhas Ghai,
Huh.
that time on.
Huh.
So, can you think about that time? I did work, I was work with Subhas Ghai.
नहीं, क्योंकि जिस टाइप की फिल्में वो बनाते थे ना, तो उसमें मैं घुस नहीं पा रहा था. तो सेंसिबिलिटी मैच इज़ वेरी इंपॉर्टेंट. So there I would feel, I mean, I admire him for the classics that he has made, but it's not something, it's not a world I can belong. I will be, but in Shekhar Kapoor's world, the way he used to think about film, I could engage in conversation and learn. Subhash ji ke saath aisa hota nahi tha, you know, at least for my personality, right? So that's also an important choice. If anybody wants to join, you can't just join any director. You should think, yeah, roughly, what is the aesthetic match? हाँ, यहाँ मैं अगर जाऊँगा तो I can be part of that world. That's very important. Now after that comes Dord. Okay, now I'm going to be a little quick क्योंकि it's probably getting late. So Dord. Now Dord, in a nutshell, Dord bombed. Right? It's a box office disaster of an expensive film. But I know today it's a cult film. 5, 6, 7 years later, people used to come up to me and say, oh my God, you are involved in the writing of Dord, how fantastic. It used to happen so often. You know, it's a cult film, very unique film, and how did this uniqueness happen? You know, those of you who have seen Ram Gopal Varma's films know that Dord and Rangila are two films that are very unlike the rest of Ram Gopal Varma's works. Right? His works, his most famous works are dark. So both Rangila and Dord are sunny films. So while Ram Gopal Varma had a basic concept on how he wanted to do the film, there were two brilliant people he had with him, right? In the writing department, my involvement in the writing department of that, it was more in terms of story structure. But all the little details of entertainment, and Dord and Rangila are full of them, okay, have a lot to do with two people. One is Neeraj Vora, the late Neeraj Vora, unfortunately he passed away, and Sanjay Chhel. It used to be, I mean, that's one of the great things about the film industry. It used to be a privilege watching the two of them work together and improvise scenes. बातों में ऐसे मजेदार scenes बन जाते थे. I used to just be bewildered at this explosion of talent. बातों में संजय कुछ बोल रहा है, नीरज कुछ बोल रहा है, देखते hilarious and original, fresh, hilarious scenes come up. Like those of you who are fans of Dord must be remembering a character called Chaco. Okay, some kind of tribal chieftain sitting in a chair and saying the funniest of things which didn't work on the day the film was released, but worked like nobody's business once the film was released on TV. Dord also has an interesting angle to it. Sanjay Dutt was in jail, you know, because of some cases against him. So he literally came out of jail to shoot for our film. So you know, you can imagine how the atmosphere on set would have been. So that is one, you know, a little thing. So after my involvement with Dord, see, how do films get made and unmade? Let me just give you an example from my life. So I had worked on this one film with Ram Gopal Varma, and you talked about Subhash Ghai. So Ram Gopal Varma and Subhash Ghai started a company. They wanted to jointly make films together. So I was signed as the first director, and Ram Gopal Varma gave me a one-line story. That one-line story ये थी कि एक छोटी सी बच्ची है जो एक जंगल में खो जाती है, और उस जंगल में एक आदमखोर शेर है. ठीक है, 5 साल की बच्ची, आदमखोर शेर. वो लोग पिकनिक मनाने आए हैं एक ग्रुप में. तो बच्ची की माँ है, तो माँ किसी की सुनती नहीं है और जंगल में घुस जाती है, और एक फॉरेस्ट रेंजर भी है जो भी घुस जाता है. फिर यू नो ऑल द ड्रामा टिल फाइनली द kid is rescued. So at that time a film had been released. I forget what its name, but it was about man-eating tigers in Africa. Okay. And the lions acted brilliantly in that film. So Ram Gopal Verma said, you let's work with the same animal chaps. So I went to LA to meet all those animal people, and what an experience it was. These huge lands full of tigers and lions, okay. And literally, I mean, I had to tell them that if I have to trust one young girl wandering around with these creatures, then let me see कि मुझ में वो दम है कि नहीं. So I used to wander around with the lions, pet this, that, you know, it was quite an experience. The other thing I did in prep for that film is I wanted to know that this is a child all alone in the middle of the night in a jungle. How does that even feel? So production arranged for me to go to Dadeli Tiger Sanctuary in Karnataka and take a walk for about 1 hour in thick jungle, andhera hi andhera, I can't see the step in front of me. And there were just 3 of us, a forest guard, me and one production person. All kinds of sounds coming from all around you. There could be king cobras, warning calls. Okay, there could be king cobras, there could be bears, there could be tigers, there could be leopards. I don't know where I am putting my foot, because I had told myself I am not going to use a torch, because that child did not have a torch. How does it even feel? How do I direct a child when I myself don't know 5% of that feeling? Ki what is it to be lost in this dark jungle? After spending the money, I don't want to name names, big stars were signed on for Forest Ranger, heroine, all big heroines, very, very famous, you all would know in a jhatka. And the money spent on, we also fixed tiger trainer, and the film fell through. Okay. Why does the film fall through? As I was developing the script from this one line, RGV was very clear that roughly, see, I am simplifying everything because I don't have the time to get into nuances. पर उनकी ये बात थी, Kannan, let's keep it simple. अभी ये जब सेटअप हो गया, ठीक है, let it be basically like then a horror film, कि कहीं से भी कोई भी wild animal आके कुछ भी कर सकता है, to the child, and let's make a movie like that. And I was working on, when I was working on the script, I lost interest in that, and I suggested to him a different approach, which in my mind was more wholesome and more commercial and interested me more. And when I tell you what my idea was, you all will say this is like hardcore commercial. So in RGV's idea, the forest ranger and the mother did not know each other at all. They were strangers, and there is no relationship that develops between them at all. तो मैंने क्या किया, मैंने थोड़ा उसको घुमाया, बोला कि the child and mother are living somewhere in Delhi, let's say. Nobody talks about who the child's father is. It is a secret. Okay? कि नहीं, बाप की बात ही मत करो. कुछ तो हुआ है disgraceful in the past. What disgraceful thing happened? I had created cowardice on an army mission. और ये बंदा जो है भाग गया आर्मी मिशन से, फिर उसने कभी अपना मुंह दिखाया ही नहीं. Till when she comes to this forest many years later, she realizes 1,000 kilometers away that this guy is a forest ranger here. See, in those times when there is no mobile phone, there is no connectivity, all this is possible. Okay. Now, the two of them, ये हीरोइन, ये जो मदर है वो सोचती है कि ये कायर जो है, जो जंग से भागा था वहां, ये मेरी बच्ची को बचाएगा. ये तो कायर है, right? And this guy is of course miserable about his kayarta, but here is his chance to prove his bravery, right? So he has to win over the trust. So Ram Gopal Verma did not agree with this at all. Right? Who is right, who is wrong, we don't know. But why am I telling you all this? Because filmmaking is very subjective. है ना? It's not objective कि चलो let's run a little experiment. तुम 10 लोगों को नरेट करो, 10 लोगों को नरेट करते हैं, कुछ निकालते हैं सर्वे रिजल्ट. ऐसा सब films are never made like that. It is made on a maker's conviction. And since RGV was the producer and that storyline, one line story idea was his, it was his conviction that was driving it. So the film fell through. Okay, just to give you an idea. How much more time you all want me to take? Because ये तो मैं आधा घंटा और भी लग सकता है. Shall I just stop and just take questions? Because I have already talked for what? You guys will be around for 15, 20, half an hour more? Yes or no? Yes. All of you will? Yes, sir. Yeah, because अगर आप यहाँ आधे लोग चले जाएंगे ना, मैं भी बंद करके मैं भी निकल जाऊंगा घर. ठीक है? हाँ. And then I get into another fascinating project about how projects get made and unmade. This is one of Aishwarya Rai's earliest films. Okay, it's a film called हम पंछी एक डाल के. ये सब कहानियां मैं आप लोगों को इसीलिए बता रहा हूं क्योंकि आजकल ना फिल्म इंडस्ट्री ऐसे चलती नहीं है. देयर इज फार मोर प्रोफेशनलिज्म कि एक बार प्रोजेक्ट शुरू हो गया ना, लगभग पैसा खर्चा हो गया ना, लगभग वो बन जाती है. वो ज़माना वैसा नहीं था. इट वॉज ऑल वेरी केओटिक, यू नो. सो they had spent one hell of a lot of money shooting in some gorgeous locations in America, Utah in America. I mean, those who have seen photos of Utah, videos of Utah know what a gorgeous place it is. And in the high ranges of Himalayas, you know, snow everywhere. Now, the stars, Aishwarya Rai was the heroine and Sunil Shetty was the hero. They had spent a lot of money, and when the edit was put together, I was not involved in this at all at that time. The edit was put together, the film didn't make sense. Just didn't. And producer and director, they fell out with each other and the film got abandoned. So at that time, by various connections, I was shown the film and asked, do you have an idea what to do with all this fabulous footage they have? So what I did was, I decided to use those portions of the footage that really work and construct a new story around it. And that new story bore a family resemblance to Mr. India. And the reason it did that is because picture में already जितना shoot हुआ था उसमें already Aishwarya Rai this is complete commercial cinema, right? Aishwarya Rai एक जगह में with 10 orphans was somehow surviving, running some kind of garage. Okay, and Sunil Shetty was an army man in a close by army base who was in love with her. Just like Mogambo was this costumed, flamboyant villain with great dialogues, we created a villain. The original cut had no villain. Created a villain called Kala Singha. वो भी कॉस्ट्यूम था, उसका भी एक अंडरग्राउंड डेन था और उसके 2 सींग थे. He also had his crazy plans about, it was so, the overall feel of the film was for kids, you know, much like Mr. India works for kids and the child in adults. So did this film. And Sunil Shetty and Aishwarya Rai were both convinced by the reworking of this. And once again we started shooting. It was a big film, big budget film. It had a lot of CGI VFX in it. and those days CGI VFX used to take, when computing power was, मैं 20 साल पहले की बात कर रहा हूँ, when computing power was so low कि CGI VFX used to take an enormous amount of time. फिल्म बनी, पर बनते बनते काफ़ी पैसा लग गया था, एंड जब डिस्ट्रीब्यूशन रिलीज का वक्त आया, that film exists in its final completed form today because of disputes between people, all the people who had invested in the film. The film never got released. So that was a film in which I was involved as co-writer and co-director with a bunch of people. Vishal Bhardwaj is a very good friend of mine. So he was watching all my misadventures. Okay. Meanwhile, I was also writing films that are close to my heart from the point of view of social justice, patriotism. For example, I had written a biopic on a man which you all should wiki because I don't want to take time describing him. He is called as the Frontier Gandhi. His life story is fascinating. I had, me and come back to Desmond Nazareth, we developed an animation project, a very ambitious animation project based on an epic that is as important to China as Ramayana and Mahabharata is for ours, called the Monkey King. ये सब भी चलता था, ambitious projects connected to my vision of justice, पर ये project pitch करते करते आज भी मैं pitch ही कर रहा हूँ. But Vishal Bhardwaj told me that I'll produce a film for you, but let us do something that can be done immediately, practically, and that is how Ichthydayan happened. Right? And after Ichthydayan, the web series started, the whole new world of web series. And I'm really going fast now because there isn't time. Web series, and which is when I got into writing. So writing books. So he mentioned one which has already been published by Speaking Tiger. The other, the acquisition announcement for that was just made 1 hour ago. Okay, so will you just put that up, please? Aishwarya or Jennifer, put that up, please. I'm sorry, I'm not rounding this and ending it in a certain way because there is so much I can talk about. E Watan, Mere Watan, I can talk about half an hour about from beginning to end, but I think I probably don't have the time. Like, there will be question and answer as soon as we are done with the announcement of the book, and in that question and answer we can talk and I'll answer as many of your questions as I can. Yeah, so this is the book. I want to introduce to you my co-writer Nandini. Here she is. Will you put the next card, please? This is being published by one of India's top houses, Westland/Pratilippi. So have you thought about what would happen if Game of Thrones, Blackadder, Larry David and Stephen Hawking get together? 2 eras, 3 pairs of doppelgangers. Doppelgangers are people who look similar to each other. 4 sex-starved time travelers, a 10th century prince beginning to lose patience with his father's longevity, quite as you are with the numbers in these sentences. A 21st century vegan villain who is determined to do what no virus could. This richly imaginative story makes for a genre-bending amalgam of literary fiction and larger-than-life fantasy, etc., which I am sure you have read by now. So I invite Nandini, like it happens when all books are announced, acquired, a few paragraphs are read out. The reason I'm keen to read out those paragraphs in front of you is that Till now, in the entire world, only 4 people have read the material that is going to be about to be read out. One is me and Nandini, and 2 people in the publishing house. So, Nandini, will you just come? It just take 5 minutes just for you to get an idea of my latest work.
Hi everyone, am I audible? I think I am. So I'm going to read out a few sections. This obviously it involves time travel, so I'm going to start chronologically because that's not how the book goes. Oppression hangs heavy in the 10th century kingdom of Somnath Dwar, where Prince Jarasandh is striving to make his word the law. Oppression hangs heavy in Mrignayani too. Here she was, aged 18. She ought rightly to have been thinking about getting her children married off, but thanks to maternal absence and paternal negligence, had been left entirely alone in the world, leading a painfully and involuntarily celibate, sterile existence. It had been 2 months since she had received news of her father's death in the dungeons of Yuvraj Jarasandh. It had been nearly a year since he had been escorted into those dungeons. His behavior in their last weeks together had been erratic, even by his standards. He had begun to teach her a new and strange language, the rules of which he himself did not seem to have mastered, for he had needed recourse to a bizarre manuscript with thin pages, strange letters, and ugly pictures. A for apple, he had taught her, B for ball, C for car, D for door. And then he had, in the last days with some desperation, shown her a series of slim boxes, which were made of a material she had never encountered and glowed with some kind of inner light, these boxes. He had told her of universes where such boxes spoke by themselves. He had placed one against his cheek and told her she would soon find that she needed to do that. He had taught her the word for namaste in this new language, hi, which had sounded plain rude, and hey lo, which had sounded worse. She had looked for the manuscript and the boxes after he had disappeared, but they seemed to have gone too. The next day, she was given the news that her father had been taken to the dungeon by the men of Yuvraj Jarasandh. Her attempts to meet him and the king had been unsuccessful. She had often wondered whether those mysterious and now mysteriously missing manuscripts and boxes had been the reason for his having been imprisoned. So, this is the first part. The second part is called Science Experiment. An ant squinted up through the glass that was wavering above it, wondering at the sudden intensity of the sun's rays. Beyond the glass, the ant could see the enormous sunken eyes, the straw-like tufts of hair, the mud-caked and sweat-drenched face, the stained white shirt, and the garish blue shorts over the disproportionate legs of the young one of a human. The ant had heard that young ones of humans could be rather dangerous and were to be avoided at all costs. The ant thought to itself that, other than looking rather uglier than the adult versions, who themselves had bizarrely shaped features and gross bodies on stout legs, there was nothing particularly remarkable about the young ones. It wondered why the sun had become intense. It was an experiment in the science textbook of the school which he attended, and he was glad this one had been retained. An experiment in the class 5 science textbook read, first, take a magnifying glass and shine on a sheet of carbon paper in hot sun. Observe carbon paper turn to ashes. Similarly, place magnifying glass in hot sun over an ant. See effect on ant. Is it the same as carbon paper? Under this was the picture of a light bulb that the retired teachers thought was an innovative way to represent an idea. And next to it, do you now see that magnifying glass also intensifies sun's heat? What do you now know about the effect of heat on non-living and living creatures? Discuss. The boy had no clue what carbon paper was, and the stationery shop to which his swearing father had been dispatched did not stock it. and so he had had to settle for the classified section of a newspaper. He had failed to make the paper burn, but thought the magnifying glass might have a better effect on the bulging-eyed creature with its shining body and spindly legs gawking up at him. Just as he had succeeded in finding the correct angle for the sun's rays to fry the creature, a hand came down above him, and he found himself being lifted up. The careful observer, which the boy wasn't, would have noticed a watch with the Rambo poster on the thin wrist of this determined hand. The boy looked up in surprise as the magnifying glass clattered to the ground and saw a strange face in the foreground and the stranger sight of the school headmaster with a never before seen ingratiating smile in the background. So the next section is called Unnatural Selection. Nature, Sambo said quietly, tried her very best. She tried her best to fight back, to fight us, but we defeated her yet again. We have manipulated her since the beginning of time with her own tools, her own body, and we did it again. In less than a year, country after country was producing its own vaccine. And if we, the industry leaders, starting with Amazon, made a killing, the pharmaceutical sector made, well, a genocide. Except the only victim here was nature and laboratory animals. But this time we will find the lab rats, we will create the threat, we will create the cure for nature and the cure for some of us. I call this unnatural selection. The members of the group assembled before him tried to smile, and to his relief most did not succeed. We must help nature along. We all know that as there is greater unnatural interaction with her, the more jumps there will be, and the more diseases humans will get. But we will cull and neutralize until the only viruses and bacteria left in the world are us, the real parasites. With this project, what could take millennia will only take years. I give you the Panacea project, of which you are the task force. Codename Doom 21. Because each metamorphosis will be as deadly as it is accurate. We will tell them that anything that the universe and its scientists throw at us, our vaccine will neutralize. It is the Panacea, and it will save the world. But in actual fact, we are the creators and the destroyers. No generic vaccine will fight this. Every vaccine will be ours. No one will have a clue what to do about this. Every mutation will have one solution, and that solution will rest with us. Doom is bigger than anything the world has ever seen. Bigger than ISIS, bigger than World War, bigger than the plague. Why bigger than the 10 plagues of Egypt? This is the day of judgment, Qayamat and Pralay rolled into one. It will strike fear in every heart. You will strike fear in every heart. And each and every one of you fully believes in this, yes? He made eye contact with each of the residents who had been inducted into the Doom 21 task force. And each and every one of you will report to Dr. Ramcharan Singh. In this project, he has all the powers I do. His word is law. With that, he walked out of the conference room and into the operating theatre. Sir, said the doctor, nodding at him. Is it here? Yes, sir. And the noose? Still around him, sir, said the doctor, moving the curtain aside. Sitting in scrubs, his body trembling, his breath choked, was the man they had lassoed the previous night. What shall we do, sir? The doctor asked. I thought we made this clear, said Sambo. All strays must be rounded up and sterilized. ABC, animal birth control, right? The man on the bed whimpered and folded his hands to plead. Sedate or no, sir? Local anesthesia, but let him watch his jewels go. And the family? The doctor asked. Well, the woman is an LR? Asked Sambo. Yes, sir, LR 78. And then there's a boy and a girl. How old are they? They look around 8 and 11. LR 79 and LR 80. We'll need to know how it works on kids too. He took a step back. I'll leave it to you, doctor. The curtain was drawn. Oh, he said. The doctor looked out. You might want to fetch his wife's clothes. He will need those when we release him back on the streets, no? The doctor smiled. Unnatural selection, you see, Sambo said.
Thank you.
Thank you.
So, thank you guys for being a great audience. We are ready for questions.
Good evening, sir. So I have two questions. The first thing, from the last few years, we are seeing all the Bollywood films that are making. It is mostly about like similar kind of story where there's more like of action and all, and the story like that does not have that much action does not perform good in box office. A recent example is a clash between Salar and Donkey. Like in my opinion, Donkey was more like a story oriented, does not have that much action scene, and Salar was more like the thing that is going on, more of action. So how do you see that shift as in a Bollywood? And the second question is, are you also go in Karan Johar's Bollywood party that he is throwing?
The last question is easy to answer. I don't go to Karan Johar's parties. But the first question, see, Salar did way below expectation. Fighter did way below expectation. Bade Miyan Chote Miyan did way below expectation. So it is Yodha, again another action film, did way below expectation. So it is not at all clear that the action films are the ones that are making money. Even Salman's film Tiger 3, right? Tiger 3 tha na? Yeah. That also was below expectation. So it is not that action films are raking the money in and others aren't. An excellent example is a film that pleasantly surprised the whole of Bollywood is 12th Fail. Right? 12th Fail was a huge hit, has collected a lot of money, and it's just the exact opposite of any action film. But having said that, it's very, very, very difficult to predict. Nobody can predict on a Thursday how the film on Friday is going to do. Nobody. Yeah.
There is a new trend, maybe more interesting, that there are we see a lot of biographies, maybe like Khan Singh Tomar or Milkha Singh. So there is a now. So now we see that a series of this is a new trend actually, and how interesting it is and how much difficult actually, what challenges actually are coming in this kind of making, and then recently as you discussed also. Ram Manohar Lohia, based on that also life events, and so
see, from the beginning of Indian film industry, very few biopics used to be made. It is only, let's say, like Manoj Kumar made a film, kind of biopic, I guess, on Bhagat Singh. Correct? There used to be very few films like that. When India has had so many fantastic heroes and heroines in so many different fields, right? It was just a matter of time when the audience was shifting from repetition of the same masala movies over and over again. The search was carried out for nice stories which the Indian audiences would be interested in. And that is why, a good biopic, like for example, the biopic that came out 2-3 days ago, Chamkila, right? That is a biopic that has come out on Netflix, which seems to have good audience reviews. So India has so many fascinating characters. I mean, who would not want to see a well-made film about them?
Sir, I am asking another question. There is early ASCII, DDLJ, Pardes, many love stories that 90s. But nowadays there is few films and not the musical hit. I am saying that. Before the film release, the music came and everybody like as a paranoid about the music, like as ASCII, DDLJ. So what is the problem behind that?
Well, what can I say except that all the brains of film industries in India are asking the same question, without any clear answer.
And few people also boring same song per day, same song.
Yeah, that's true. That's true. I mean, none of us know the answer to that question. In fact, one of the symptoms of what you are saying is that एक ज़माने में क्या होता था, एक फिल्म के लिए एक म्यूजिक डायरेक्टर होते थे who used to give whatever 6, 7, 8 songs. But slowly a trend came when they realized that it is not happening with one music director giving hit songs, so many hit songs. The trend came that let's have one music supervisor who will collect songs from different singers and put together an album for the film. That is an extremely common trend today because of the difficulty, and why this difficulty is there, I really don't know.
Sir, yesterday I asked you like how you got into filmmaking and you promised to tell the story today, and of course your story is fascinating. So, but you also you clearly you open up and say like you wanted to do for the mass audience. I think that is something not many directors would want to agree. And then you worked with extraordinary people, like extraordinary projects like the Bandit Queen, and you also worked with kind of legends, kind of RGV and like them. But you told the story where the stuff you are doing, they fell through, as you said, like mating and unmating of projects. So how did you go about this journey of when you are trying stuff and they are failing, and you want to reach out to the mass, you are not able to do it, and meanwhile you are also focusing on this animated projects and various stories. Now you have written various books. So how does this add up, sir? How are you dealing with that? And in case if your interest was in the mass cinema, then how all this stuff added up, and how does that relate to that, the patriotism, that kind of bad story you had from the beginning?
Yeah, see, both these web series potential projects, the 2 books that have come out, though both of them are fantasy fiction, they fundamentally deal with questions of justice, both of them. So you can consider them as parables, allegories. They may not be directly कि कोई गरीब है, कोई अमीर है, अमीर गरीब के कुछ हो रहा है. They may not be, but in their own allegorical, parable kind of way, they are centrally about the same question. And it is see, a film is after all 2-3 hours long. If you are able to tell a story and explore the story with much greater depth, then it's a wonderful opportunity, and that can only happen in web series form. So in that I am not deviating from the themes that really interest me.
Sir, just last one follow-up question. So now you have done this. So what does excite you now? What about now? Because there are so many avenues like web series, animated series, or books, and the mass cinema obviously. And cinema itself is in an OTT form and the theater release. So what excites you now, sir?
There is a very famous episode that a group of Indian film directors went to Japan on maybe in the context of some film festival. So they met the great legend Akira Kurosawa, right? So Akira Kurosawa was very prolific in movie making, right? Some of them were good, some of them not so good, etc. So these filmmakers asked him a question: how do you make so many movies? So he said, देखो मैं एक झोला लेकर घूमता रहता हूँ, झोले में बहुत सारी कहानियाँ रहती है, तो when I find a कहानी that matches a producer, मैं बना देता हूँ. तो literally झोला रखना पड़ता है. Develop various projects, you never know what is going to happen, when, you never know. You need a series of things need to come together to finally make a film happen.
Hello, sir. Sir, as a viewer of Ekti Diane, fantastic movie. Sir, what I would like to ask you, what was the idea and process behind making of the fantastic movie? As the character of Bobo, a magician, and as his sister dies, he is forced to do some things like psychiatric treatments and all. At the last, the movie's end is we want the second part of that movie. Are there any possibilities of arrival of second part?
Sequel?
हाँ, second.
नहीं, वो टाइम चला गया. 10 साल हो गए वो पिक्चर रिलीज होके, वो टाइम चला गया. But thank you for liking it, Thidan.
Hi, sir. So, hey. And this side. Okay. Hi, sir. Basically, I have two questions. So, the first one is that how do you see the youth entering into the film industry? Not in terms of the modeling, but in terms of other skills like graphic designing, VFX, video editing. And the second question is that, like, we have seen the rise of agencies like TVF. How do you see such startups coming up in the future that could, change the film industry in some way? And why do you think that such startups are rising in the last decade? Why have they risen? And is there a change that the film industry will witness due to that? Thank you.
See, the market has exploded. Okay, the sheer volume of the number of hours of software that is being created is like humongous. There is no better time to enter the film and television business than right now. We just consider the sheer avenues through which creatives are distributed, and the options are there at every budget. Whether it is TVF is at a certain budget range, or if it is a big fantasy film. It's just that, and as India's economy keeps growing, the appetite for this is only going to increase. It is just a fantastic time for young people to join, provided you are able to stay the course. It is not an easy course, but opportunities are plenty, including startups. For example, TVF is a great idea of a very successful startup, and there is room for plenty more TVFs, provided you are able to get together such a large creative team operating in tandem and run it. TVF is a great model actually. It has not been replicated to the same extent by anybody else, but that model is still very, very, very doable.
Yeah, actually, I have a follow-up. So, my question was that, how can the youth enter into the film industry? Like, what could be the channels through which we can approach the site if we don't have that contacts?
The formal advertising for positions and all that does not happen much in the film industry. You just have to go to the places where the film industries are centered, whether it is Chennai, Hyderabad, Kochi, Mumbai, of course, and do the rounds. Everybody knows where the offices are situated, find contacts, and that is if you want to start, let's say, in any department and move up the rungs. But if you are creatively interested in, say, writing and direction, given how cheap technology is today, you with very, very basic editing software on a laptop and basic sound software and a nice smartphone with a very good camera, you can easily make a short film as a showreel. That, and similarly write scripts. The calling card, the most successful calling card would be a creative work like that. Because there will be people, there are so many people who post their short films on YouTube, hoping that industry people see it, recognize their talent, and even if they don't, the very fact that it's there on YouTube, if you're lucky, maybe it has garnered tens of thousands of views, which makes your case even stronger. But that is something that you should strongly do, simply because making these things is affordable. That's the best way. The other way is, what should I say, is an endurance race. You know, starting as an AD and then it's extremely, what should I say, it's very, you won't get time when you're working on as an AD to do creative things, because the work itself is so demanding, and then by the time one project is over, you go on to the next project. So even ADs who are working in Bollywood, they will take time off to try and put together a show reel which they can show people. That's very important.
I think.
Hi, sir. Hi, sir. I am a big fan of Ram Gopal Varma, sir. I have watched one movie in Telugu, that is Rakta Charitra, sir. Nowadays, he tweets everything, sir. What he thinks, he tweets everything like straightforward. Is Ram Gopal Varma is correct tweeting like that, sir?
I don't read his tweets. I'm not on social media. I don't know what he tweets.
If he tweets, that will create a history in Tollywood industry, sir.
History in?
Tollywood industry, Tollywood, Telugu.
No, I don't understand. His tweets are widely viewed, you mean?
Yes, sir.
Yeah, I mean, he is a legendary figure in
but nowadays he is not making like that movies, sir, like Rakta Charitra.
But that is because, largely speaking, if you analyze the work of all directors, there is a certain phase in which they have peak creativity. You can't expect that everybody can continuously create for 30-40 years. There are in both. Mani Ratnam, for example, is a rare example of for decades who has maintained the highest quality, or let's say Yash Chopra is another example, right? There are very few examples, or Sanjay Bansali is another example, Rajkumar Hirani. There are just a handful of directors who over a long period of time have sustained their quality. So it's just human that you are at pre-creativity for a few years and then you no longer can work at the same level. That's just human.
Sir, who is your favorite director in Tollywood industry?
I don't follow Tollywood all that much.
Okay.
I see, so
Okay,
it's
sir.
not. But I can say one thing for sure. I was absolutely mesmerized by Allu Arjun in Pushpa.
Thank you, sir. I am also a big fan of Allu Arjun.
Yeah. What a performance! An extremely difficult performance, and the elan with which he has pulled it off was striking. Very difficult performance. The way he talked, moved, the accent that he caught, successfully and powerfully portraying one roadside beggar kind of attitude, and how he turns into a big, it's quite a performance. Very difficult performance and brilliantly done.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you, everyone. I don't want to be a villain in this, but that's all time that we have. And thank you so much, sir, for giving your time for here. And I just want to call Mr. Kaviraj, sir, to felicitate our esteemed guest.
Thank you very much. You all have been a great audience, and I could have talked a lot more actually, but unfortunately, shortage of time. So here we are. Okay, so I didn't even close my talk properly. I hope you all had a good time.
Thank you so much, sir, and thank you for the audience, all engaged and actually asking a lot of questions, as is the case always. And thank you for the anecdotes, very interesting. And hopefully, we will have more Kannan Iyers coming out of IIT Madras alumni. So that will be the most inspiring part of the talk, right? Like, so look forward to that. And as a token of our appreciation, we would like to present a small memento.
Thank you. Thank you so much.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Thank you very much.